Hey, how you doing, brother? Hey, my name is Joel. I'm with the Bexar County Sheriff's Office. The only reason I'm stopping you is that I was watching over there. You were drifting over that fog line for the guy. I just want to make sure everything's okay.
Is your wife? Oh, okay. And who's that, your mom? Oh, okay.
Imagine that a law-abiding, completely innocent Texas oil field worker is just driving to a work site and back one day, and his government, who is spying on him from some secret base somewhere, where a spy named Kiki is wondering why is he making that trip in one day as opposed to two. And so he directs a secretive unit of Texas deputies, who were trained by the highly respected legal scholar known as Dennis, since banned from training police in his home state of New Jersey, to pull over the innocent oil field worker using Jedi mind tricks taught to them by Dennis.
Do you have anything in your vehicle that you're not supposed to have? Do you have any marijuana in the vehicle? Any cocaine? Any heroin? And that's black or brown. Any THC oil? THC wax, methamphetamine, being crystal and liquid.
Along with an alert from a drug-sniffing dog who has never not alerted for them ever in the past.
So he got a positive alert on your driver's side door. Is there anything small that you know of? I'm gonna have you sit in the back seat while I search.
To reveal the truth that the innocent oil field worker is actually a mastermind cartel smuggling kingpin, except that he isn't. After detaining him for an hour and searching every inch of his truck, the deputies had to let the guy go.
So like I said, I try not to be a jerk. This is what happens.
But the guy is pissed, and he complains. And Internal Affairs says that he did nothing wrong. So he calls the Institute for Justice. They investigate, they're shocked by what they find, they file a lawsuit. They also tell this West Virginia lawyer, sort of still starting out on his YouTube journey, about the case, and he does a video on it, which goes viral, which causes Internal Affairs to reopen the case and fire that deputy. And at his termination hearing, the deputy complains that the YouTube video left out a lot of stuff, and that it just wasn't fair. That would be crazy, wouldn't it? Well, it actually happened. That and a lot more.
You know, I asked him if they were successful at catching a bunch of smugglers. And he said, no, not only were they not successful, I teased them for being bad at this. We're being tracked more than we think we are.
If we want to stay on top of the constant government overreach, we have to be able to stay on top of the information. Even when I went to law school, it was all about reading books. It's just not that way anymore. We gather information now using our eyes and our ears. And that's where these wireless Raycon earbuds come in. These Raycon Everyday Earbuds Classic deliver top-notch sound quality at half the price of other premium brands with similar features. To this video. In 2019, the Bexar County, Texas Sheriff launched a criminal interdiction unit that was designed to roam the highways using traffic stops as a pretext to hunt for smugglers. By early 2022, the unit had developed a 3-step tactic to get into people's cars. 1, they would stop people from making trips with one-day turnarounds. 2, they would extend those stops with front-seat police car interrogations. And 3, if a driver refused a search, they would call a drug dog that was cued to alert every time. Using this tactic, this interdiction unit stopped innocent drivers, forced them into a trap where everything they did justified further investigation, and then conjured up a reason to search their car. Simply put, the Bexar County Sheriff's Office created a machine designed to skirt the Fourth Amendment with suspicionless fishing expeditions in the hope that something would turn up. This interdiction unit targeted Alec Schott, a married father of 2 with no criminal record, while he was on a business trip in March of 2022. Interdiction Deputy Babb pulled Alec over on the pretext that Alec drifted over a fog line.
Hey, how you doing, brother? Hey, my name is Joel. I'm with the Bexar County Sheriff's Office. The only reason I'm stopping you is that I was watching over there. You were drifting over that fog line for the guy. I just want to make sure everything's okay.
But the undisputed facts show that was a lie, that Alec drove completely within his lane, and that Deputy Babb actually stopped him for making a one-day turnaround trip. Babb then ordered Alec into his patrol car, into the front passenger seat, and interrogated him on video. Even though Alec acted completely normal and all computer checks came back clean right after they entered Babb's car.
Hey, I'm gonna have you step out and sit in my passenger seat while I do your warning, okay? Thanks a lot, man. How you doing today?
Are you know? Where are you from, Houston? What were you doing down here? Oh, really? What do you do for work?
What is that?
Where was your customer at? I'm not from Texas, man. I'm from Maine.
Well, I drove last night because it was.
What hotel did you stay at? I just stayed at one the other day. I was lucky. The one I stayed at was a new one. This thing I'm giving you, man, it looks like a ticket, but it's a warning, okay? I'm 42 years old, and I spent 18 years as an infantryman prior to being a cop, so I'm not the brightest.
It's hard work, man.
Yeah. When was the last time you came down this way? You like Houston? I know there's a lot of crime. Stayed at that Holiday Inn, and I was like, and I was in this thing, and I thought I was gonna get.
Well, there's some weird parts. I don't know which part you're in, but there's some parts I would not see.
I was right by the airport.
Oh yeah,
So-
no, that's
We just had an 18-wheeler the other day, 100 and something people in it. So your name is Scott, SCHOTT, and what's in your address, date of birth? Has this been your truck from the beginning? What year is it? And it was funny because when San Antonio recently got that snow, they acted the way Maine did to the ice storm.
yeah.
And I was like, man, it was like 3 inches. It was horrible. What's your phone number, sir? I think sleepy drivers are more dangerous than drunk drivers. You live in a house or an apartment? And then what was it you were working on with your customer here? Were you selling him something? So you just kind of go there and tell him about it? Did you go over there with anybody else? Have you ever been in trouble with anything? Anything with the law or anything like that? Yeah, I always tell people, man, they think all cops are out here for speeding. I was like, no, not all cops. So what I do, what I am is I'm on what's called a criminal interdiction unit. So I don't have to deal with all that crap. I don't give tickets, I give warnings. And the main reason is I sit on the side of the highway and I'm out here looking for, because it's bad out here, human smuggling, drug smuggling, and all those things like that. If you're going 100 miles an hour, there's a cop before that, it ain't me. The guy I'm looking for is the guy that's going to be going 76 into 75 and slows down to 65 when he sees me. Now we're dealing with somebody who just reacted, so.
Reacted poorly, very guilty.
It's all behavior stuff, man, and that's what we do out here. Oh my God. Is your wife?
Yes.
Oh, okay. And who's that, your mom? Oh, okay. Do you have anything in your vehicle that you're not supposed to have? Do you have any marijuana in the vehicle? Any cocaine? Any heroin? And that's black or brown. Any THC oil, THC wax, vapes, anything of that nature? Any types of methamphetamine, being crystal or liquid, any pills that aren't prescribed to you, any hallucinogens, being THC oil, THC wax, anything like that. Do you have any large sums of money over $10,000? Do you have any types of anything illegal? Has anybody asked you to carry anything in your vehicle? And are you the only person that's driven this vehicle for the last 48 hours? Would you allow me to search your vehicle?
Completing this 3-step tactic, when Alex refused to consent to a search of his car, Bab called a drug dog that over the previous year had never failed to alert on a roadside free air sniff of a vehicle.
Would you allow me to search your vehicle? Okay, what I'll do is we have a canine pretty close, so I'm gonna have a canine come out and do a walk around your vehicle. That way it'll go quicker. But just I have some reasons to believe that there might be something in your vehicle. I've been wrong before, but there's just some things I'm seeing that makes me want to go a little further with the investigation, okay? So that's what we're going to do. I'll wait for a canine. The canine will walk around the outside of your vehicle. If it alerts to anything, then we'll do a search of the vehicle. Okay, so he got a positive alert on your driver's side door. Is there anything small that you know of? I'm gonna have you sit in the back seat while I search. I'm not gonna put handcuffs on you or nothing, right? But you are detained because of a positive alert.
So when this rigged dog alerted to Alex's vehicle, interdiction officers then searched Alex's truck for 40 minutes, prying open every crevice and pouring out every bag. They found nothing illegal because there was nothing to find.
Okay, sir. We're done. I'm gonna give you this before I forget. Yeah, and then your warning. We took off your car seats so that we could get under the seat. But like I said, I try not to be a jerk about things because 9 times out of 10 this is what happens. So.
Yeah, 9 times out of 10, that's what happens. I mean, who would think that when you pull over innocent people driving in Texas and you lie, cheat, and steal your way to search their vehicles, who would think that 9 out of 10 of them are actually law-abiding citizens and you find nothing illegal in their cars. So you may have seen my original video on this from over 2 years ago. As far as body cam footage goes, it will always be a classic. The footage of this deputy who clearly thinks he's a whole lot smarter than he actually is, having this conversation with this oil field worker that really was borderline Reno 911 material. Recently, at an Institute for Justice event that I was attending in Arlington, Virginia, I was talking to Josh Wyndham, who is the attorney on that case. And he was giving me the update on everything that has happened in the past 2 years on that case. And it really was an epic update. Like all the things that happened, from that deputy being fired to why he was fired, and all of the insane things that they found out during the discovery process in the lawsuit that is still ongoing. So finally, I was able to discuss this with Josh for an update video, and I think that you're going to find that a lot of what they discovered, what Josh has to say, is going to blow your mind. Tell me what happened afterwards.
A lot has happened since we've gotten through discovery, and so we've learned a lot about kind of what was going on behind the scenes of this traffic stop, and then kind of what has happened since the case was filed. So I can kind of tell you about both of those things if you want. In discovery, I think one of the big picture things that we learned was that this was not just some kind of random traffic stop. It was not a officer on the side of the road sees a traffic violation and decides in that moment, pull this guy over for a traffic violation. Instead, he had been waiting for my client Alex Schott's license plate to drive on by. And the reason he had been waiting for that, we learned in discovery, is that he was a member of Bexar County's criminal interdiction unit. And this unit had 2 officers, both of whom were in a secret WhatsApp group. And this WhatsApp group was populated by other supposedly interdiction officers from other agencies throughout Texas and potentially elsewhere. And they were unvetted, they were unidentified. There was no way that the officers who were in this group could know who else was in the group. But people would drop tips into this WhatsApp chat, and they would say things like, X license plate number flagged for a 1-day turnaround from Houston to Carrizo Springs and back, which is my client's travel pattern. And once that license plate was flagged, they would say, if this guy drives to your jurisdiction, stop him. And so Deputy Babb, who's the guy who stopped my client, was sitting on the side of the highway on I-35, waiting for that license plate to go by. And when my client drove by, that is the exact moment when he claims he drifted over the fog line and committed a traffic violation. And so in his telling, it just so happens to be the case that the moment this license plate he was already looking for drove by him is the moment my client committed a traffic violation. Now, we think that that's not true. You can watch my own client's dash cam footage, shows him driving totally straight. We have expert analysis of that is unrebutted, that shows he did not commit a violation, he did not drive over the line.
No way. Ah, no.
But the other key fact here is that Deputy Babb turned off his own dash cam the moment before the violation allegedly occurred. And so after we filed this lawsuit, and this gets me into the other thing I wanted to talk about, after we filed this case, there was a big kind of social media stir about our lawsuit, in part generated by some of the interest in your video, John.
Despite the complaint reporting his civil rights violations, Babb and Molina were not and have not been disciplined for violating any Bexar County policy and custom concerning what you saw in this footage.
And the county actually conducted a second internal affairs investigation into this case. They weren't going to do that before we filed this case. They weren't going to do that before social media blew up. But once there was a lot of online interest, all of a sudden they decided, we have to investigate this further. So they opened a new investigation into Deputy Babb. They interviewed other officers. They kind of turned over every stone, and they concluded 2 things. 1, everything he did was consistent with their policies. And 2, he should be fired for turning off his dash cam and lying about the fact that he had turned off his dash cam. Because when they asked him, he said, it mistakenly malfunctioned. that wasn't true. It turned out he'd intentionally flicked it off right before the moment of truth.
And he didn't mistakenly turn it off as he was interrogating your client sitting in his car.
Do you have any large sums of money over $10,000? Do you have any types of anything illegal? Has anybody asked you to carry anything in your vehicle? And are you the only person that's driven this vehicle for the last 48 hours?
It was
No.
working at that point.
Well, that's his body cam, right? But I mean, he knows how to use cameras, is the point, right? He's well aware of how to use dash cam, how to use body cam. And, he intentionally turned off his dash cam before the alleged traffic violation, but he turned on and mounted his body cam on that dash to capture the entire, he calls it an interview, but I call it an interrogation, with my client in the car. And that is the way these interdiction officers operate all the time. They have a standard practice of setting up that body cam video on their dash and recording these front seat interrogations. We learned that these interdiction officers had a standard practice of parking their cars perpendicular to the highway. Often you'll see cop cars, parked horizontally or slanted so that they can actually see oncoming traffic. These guys parked their cars at a direct right angle to the highway, and then they had a tendency to pull over vehicles that they had already flagged for one-day turnarounds for the same three kind of movement violations. So it was failure to maintain a lane, drifting over the fog line, and unsafe lane change, right? Or changing without a signal. All of these are these kind of very squishy, like, did you touch the line by an inch or a fraction type of violations. And this is actually kind of shocking to me. These two officers, over a 3-ish year period, accounted for 30% of all traffic violations in Bexar County for those kinds of lane violations when there were over 250 officers conducting traffic stops in Bexar County. So we're talking about two officers who are conducting a disproportionate number of traffic stops for these, very subjective violations that their dash cams are not even capturing.
So following this internal investigation, what happened?
The officer was ultimately kind of sent all the way up the chain of command, and he was terminated for misrepresenting, what had happened with his dash cam. And I think it's really notable that, there was a thorough investigation into what he did during this stop, the way he pulled over my client for, we say, not committing a traffic violation, the way he interrogated him in his front car for acting innocently and acting normally. I mean, if you watch the video, and your first video, I think, has a lot of this footage, Alec is just answering questions calmly and truthfully about his work trip.
It's all behavior stuff, man, and that's what we do out here. Oh my God.
And according to Deputy Babb, that was extremely suspicious behavior, and it led him to kind of keep the investigation going and going to eventually call a drug dog to the scene. And the county concludes after this investigation, all of that was consistent with our policy too. The only thing you did wrong, buddy, is you turned off your dash cam, and that's not okay.
And you got caught and embarrassed us.
And exactly. And I think ultimately what's going on here is the county has set up Deputy Babb as kind of the fall guy for what happened here, when in reality, I think if you listen to his deposition testimony, if you look at the documents produced in this case, it's quite clear that he was following his training, he was acting consistent with county custom. Everything he did was consistent with what his supervisors wanted him to be doing in terms of operating this interdiction unit, and yet he was kind of set up as the fall guy for this, when again, it's the county who should be held responsible.
Are they still engaging in this type of behavior? Do you know?
Yeah, they have. The sheriff has formally closed the interdiction unit, which was his own invention a few years ago. And he closed it after we filed the lawsuit. I asked him in deposition if he thought the unit was sort of a failed experiment. He said, yeah, it's a failed experiment. But what's notable is that the officers who were doing interdiction, setting aside Deputy Babb, are still doing the same kind of stops within other units. And so it's not that the practice has ended. It's just that the formal title of the unit they were once on has ended. It's been disbanded and dispersed, but the county continues to conduct these pretextual kind of fishing expedition stops. At the beginning, we know the sheriff wanted to kind of follow the model of like nearby Texas county interdiction units. And so he was inspired by the way they were, busting a bunch of drug smugglers on the highways. And he said, I want to get those big flashy headlines myself too and get those big busts. But what turned out happening in Bexar County, at least, was that the way this was being conducted, pulling over people for traffic violations that don't exist, interrogating people for acting innocently in their cars, that's not going to produce a lot of big busts. And, I think one of the things that really stood out to me when I was deposing the sheriff was, I asked him if they were successful at catching a bunch of smugglers. And he said, no, not only were they not successful, I teased them for being bad at this. I made fun of them for not being good at this. And so ultimately, it's not surprising they closed down the unit for being a real spectacular failure. But yeah, I think what they wanted at the end of the day was the big punchy headlines of Dare County Sheriff's officers are catching, kilos and kilos of drugs on the highways. We also learned that they do keep, some of the assets they seize through forfeiture during these stops. So, if they seize a truck, they'll keep the truck for their unit and stuff like that. And so there is a set of other incentives that probably does play a part in this, but I think a lot of it is just, the desire for headlines.
I could probably go, I've never been to Texas outside an airport, but I could probably go sit on the side of the road and more effectively pick out a vehicle that likely has drugs in it than this guy did. It's like it's obvious from the very first second that this guy is not a drug runner.
This is a really interesting point to me because I didn't know a ton about the interdiction world prior to this suit. When I first filed the case, I thought that officers had violated clearly established law by stopping someone for a traffic violation that didn't happen, by extending the stop based on totally normal conduct. That just seemed like clear Fourth Amendment violations to me. And then once we learned more about the fact that this was part of a bigger story and this was part of a systematic effort to stop people in this way, I started to learn about what interdiction is. And these guys think that they have this down to a science. Deputy Babb during the stop, he says to Alec, right before they call the dog, he says, I've been doing behavioral analysis on you. And that's a term of art in the interdiction world where they all think that there are these sort of like psychologists who can look at you and read your, they call it chest compressions, but it's just, we call it breathing, right?
So what I do is I talk to people and I do behavioral analysis type stuff. And I've been wrong before, but there's just some things I'm seeing that makes me want to go a little further with the investigation, okay? I'll be straight up with you. So because I'm out here looking for big shit, and this is how I break it down to people. If you have anything small, these dogs will alert right down to a roach in the ashtray. So I don't go to bed at night and dream about putting people in jail.
No,
it ain't that serious for me. So
I don't have anything to hide in my face.
And then say and another big one I do that cops fail to do a lot is, so you said no. If I was to say, okay, I'm gonna have a dog come out, and then you were to say yes, I would say no. We're not gonna do that.
Right.
We're not gonna, because then it's coercion and all that. A lot of guys mess that up. Let me call this up because I know he's not smart. Is there a narcotics canine available?
They look at your eye movement. They look at, whether you laugh loudly or softly. It's the smallest bits of body language they kind of pick apart and say, that's evidence of criminality. And I think, one thing that really struck me is that when you listen to Deputy Babb describe all of the things that he thought Alec was doing that constituted suspicious behavior, like if you locked me in a room for an hour and you just watched me, like with unblinking eyes, right? You could spin so much of the things that I decide to do in that hour as suspicious, right? Because I'm locked in an uncomfortable environment trying to act normally. You can pretty much spin anything as suspicious if that's the way you're going to approach it.
Have you figured out where this came from? Did they all go to street cop training seminars?
In October 2021, about 1,000 police officers attended a private police training conference in Atlantic City. What we found was really disturbing.
I'm not going to the guy who's board you like, I am not a citizen of the United States under Act 12-6. Shut the right? Let me pepper spray, tase, window broke out, mother.
Because they're doing similar things across the country. Is there some central source of this interdiction training where they're teaching these guys about, this supposed science of, drug runner whispering?
Yeah, you're probably familiar with the courses, but there's a part of the second internal affairs investigation report on Deputy Babb that ends up in him being fired, where he's asked a series of questions, and one of those questions he responds to by saying, here's all the training that I got that kind of led me to act the way that I did on this occasion. And it's the repeat players, street cop, desert snow, 720 interdiction, he mentions evading honesty by Sean Parda, all these kind of interdiction world materials that I think you're seeing more and more of across the country. And there was that great New Jersey comptroller report about street cop and the way that they train officers to violate the Fourth Amendment, or at least skirt the Fourth Amendment.
We investigated this 6-day conference hosted by a private company called Street Cop Training. Instructors taught unconstitutional policing practices, teaching officers to stop motorists without a lawful basis and to illegally prolong traffic stops.
Have a day where you go out and go, people pull over 20 people in a row for the sole purpose of asking a series of questions and make up your own questions. Something as simple as, hey, how you doing? Where you coming from? You know, hey, where you going? Be real friendly about stuff and just see how people answer questions. You will learn general baseline.
We've all seen the videos of Kenny Williams with him sitting in the driver's seat. He's finger fucking his computer, really just playing Tetris, not doing anything. And he's asking them very simple questions in the midst of, you know, his investigation. Oh, so who's that in the car? Where'd you guys say you're going? You going for a long time? I have family out that way. Making up a story and trying to engage them in a casual conversation.
So that's Brad Gilmore of the Bergen County, New Jersey Prosecutor's Office, advocating for prolonging motor vehicle stops in violation of the Fourth Amendment.
And it's not surprising that when officers are trained that way through these kind of third-party private training programs, that they end up, not just violating random people's rights, but sort of systematically doing it and thinking that they had it down to a science. And one thing that really stood out to me from Deputy Babb's deposition was, we were asking him about the way interdiction works, and he was sort of explaining that, like, when you pull over cars that look like they would be associated with smuggling, which is kind of getting to your point earlier about, like, this doesn't fit the profile of a smuggler. He's like, it's not really those cars you want. You don't want those cars because they're going to have the small personal possession amount of marijuana or whatever. What you want is to pull over the grandmas. What you want to pull over is the family with kids in the car, because those folks are the ones who are going to have kilos in the trunk. And that just strikes me as totally preposterous.
So he really did go to street cop training.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, not only did he go to street cop, but he had, after we filed the case, he actually had Facebook messages with, I forget the guy's name right now, Bongino, the guy who is, kind of ran
Benino or something.
Benino, thank you, yeah.
Right? Let me pepper spray, tase, windows broke out.
He actually had messages with him where he asked him to send him case law supporting what he had done. So it's, he was pulling directly from that fountain of training.
Well, I was looking at some of the stuff that they've put on sort of in response to all the criticism they had, a year ago or so. And his response, one of them was, well, we have the best case law guy in the business. And so I looked up on their staff, like, who is this? His case law guy is not a lawyer. He's just like some cop who studies case law. By the way, I just want to emphasize that I had no idea that this guy that I'd done the video about 2 years ago learned all of this ridiculous stuff from Street Cop, who I would do a video on like a year later. And digging into this case file, like, you really can trace all of this ridiculousness back to the Street Cop dude. For example, let's look at the sworn deposition testimony of former Deputy Babb. When he was asked by IJ lawyers where he learned this stuff, one of the things he says was street cop training, and the founder and CEO, Dennis Benino. So they ask, okay, how did you know Mr. Benino? And he says, through training. He's also an instructor himself. In the world of law enforcement, he's a case law mastermind. Basically, he's a guy that he knows the case law. I can ask this man a question, and he, through memory, knows, the case law that covers this, and in his class, he teaches case law. He says that Benino is where he learned a lot of his case law regarding traffic stops. So the IJ lawyer asks, can you give me a couple of takeaways from Mr. Benino's trainings? And he says, I was on patrol. I only had academy training. I was literally just looking at vehicles for violations and stopping vehicles for violations, and I was getting nowhere other than giving tickets and warnings. But then I went to this class, and this class taught me how to analyze driving behavior. He taught about driving behaviors, case law, of what we can and can't do, explaining all the things that allows you to run criminal interdiction type things to where you're watching the driver and everything, rather than just the vehicle and the violation. He opened up the spectrum of finding crime before it happens, through traffic stops, using case law. So he opened my eyes and was the beginning of, wow, I can do a lot more than I thought with this case law thing. And then he became kind of like that guy, one of the mentors I had out there for case law, with his knowledge of case law. But wait, there's more. In the discovery process, the IJ lawyers actually obtained copies of the Facebook messages between Babb and Benino, where Bab is asking for case law advice and Benino is providing it.
I just can't help but think that if I had been in Alex's shoes, it would end up the exact same way. It's almost like an algorithm they're applying, where they know they want to search the car, and they can just, whatever you do, they'll find a way to take that behavior and spin it to get to the outcome they want, right? Whether you act normally, whether you act, you're visibly nervous, whether you're calm, it doesn't matter. They're going to spin that as this guy is really good at hiding his criminality.
Right, it's like they're teaching cops to be manipulators.
Yeah.
It's like having a conversation with a drug addict. Like, there's no rationality. Like, whatever you say, they'll turn around and use against you.
Yeah, I mean, they really do think of themselves as kind of doing a form of legitimate psychology and psychological analysis on people, and it's the way they describe people's body language and like what are signs of nervousness and they think of themselves as people who can read involuntary signs of nervousness. And so, like, Deputy Bab had this thing where he would put stickers like all throughout his patrol car that were designed to, he called it visual stimulation. And the whole idea is, if I get people in my front seat of my patrol car, the stickers will prompt them to involuntarily behave in ways, not just with words, but with even their own body language, right? Their breathing, where they're looking, that will elicit suspicious responses if they're actually smugglers. But the problem is that when you ask him what suspicious responses would look like, he'll say things like, not looking at my stickers is suspicious. There's no way to win the game once they're in the car.
Were any of the other officers who were involved disciplined, as far as you know?
No, and I think it's notable because, Deputy Bab was the one who, in the videos that, our video, your video, that were posted online that generated so much attention, and he's like front and center, so his face is kind of associated with this incident. But Deputy Garrett was also there, Deputy Molina, the canine handler, and the other interdiction officer. They were both also on the scene. There was a supervisor for this unit that was sort of the head honcho of it all, pulling the strings, named Sergeant Gamboa. Like, all these folks were directly involved in this machine they had set up to get into people's cars on the highways, and none of them were investigated after this case was filed. None of them were investigated after this blew up. And I think that's really just another data point for the fact that the county isn't interested in rectifying the system they have in place. It's just interested in having a fall guy.
As far as you know, do you think that they're still doing this right now in Bexar County?
Yeah, I think that they're doing it with less visibility. Previously they did it under the auspices of a formal interdiction unit that had like criminal interdiction stitched on the uniforms. They no longer have those uniforms in that unit, but I'm certain they're still doing this throughout Bexar County.
How did you find out about the WhatsApp group? Is that something that you discovered, or did they volunteer that? Was that made known in any of the criminal cases?
It came out both in deposition and through actually the court granted a motion to compel for some cell phone data, text messages, messages between officers, that kind of stuff that the county had been withholding up to that point. And then it kind of all came out throughout the process of looking through those messages that the court compelled them to produce, that this was all part of a WhatsApp group. These officials use this group pretty regularly with the sign off from the unit supervisor. And I find that pretty shocking because, there's a moment where, I'll just give you one little anecdote. So Deputy Bab says that he got the information about Alex allegedly suspicious one-day turnaround from Houston to Carrizo Springs from a guy named Kiki. And, we asked him in deposition, like, who's Kiki? And he said, I don't really know. I don't know his real name. I've never met him before. I think he might work at the Laredo Fusion Center. And we asked, okay, well, have you ever been to the Laredo Fusion Center? Can anybody confirm it exists? Nobody in the case could confirm it even existed. And so we're talking about like a tip from an anonymous guy who works at a place that nobody can confirm even exists and who you've never heard from before that day. And he is the one providing you the information on which you're relying to pull over somebody for what you say is a suspicious travel pattern, but what is really just, Alec works in oil fields. He's in the gas and pipeline industry. He drove to Carrizo Springs because that's where one of their clients are. And is it really that surprising that somebody from Houston would drive to the, one of the biggest shale deposits in all of Texas, if not the world? Probably not.
Well, these fusion centers, these are where they're reading our private emails, reading our text messages without a warrant for like national security purposes.
Yeah.
It's not supposed to be used, for interdiction teams, for law enforcement.
Yeah, and that's my understanding of them. I think overall, though, a broader point here is that fusion centers are relatively shady institutions. There's not a ton of transparency on them. And so would I be surprised if there was some tip from a fusion center somewhere that made its way to Deputy Babb through a game of telephone? Like, no, I wouldn't be surprised about that. But the problem is, and this, what we have here illustrates the issue, is nobody can confirm the source of this information, right? And so, it's not just that the fusion center plays like the animating role here. There's also I think license plate readers are becoming more and more of an issue, not just on the kind of occasional, you see one on a bridge somewhere, and we're not talking about red light cameras, we're talking about license plate readers. And IJ, we've got this case out in Norfolk, Virginia with, we're challenging a citywide surveillance system involving license plate readers installed throughout town. But this interdiction unit actually had readers installed on its cars, relatively early, before that was common. And they had access to a pretty detailed database of license plate, history for drivers. And so if a driver went by them, the car would automatically scan it, and they would be able to see a map of where that person had been in the past. And so, I think the part of the problem here is that we're being tracked more than we think we are as we drive throughout states like Texas and elsewhere. If you're going from Houston to Carrizo Springs and back, every jurisdiction along the way, somebody is sort of tagging the fact that your vehicle was here and there and there. And if officers are kind of following that, whether through a fusion center or otherwise, they can create not only a map of where you've been, but a story about what that map tells them, right? And according to them, it's driving south and then north again. That's super suspicious, right? And so it just sort of shows you this information can be abused relatively quickly if it's in the wrong hands.
They just work backwards, and then they'll find the justification to stop the person later or lie about it.
Yeah, and that's what happened here, and I think that happens probably more than it should. We can put a bit of the blame on the Supreme Court for this. There's that Wren decision from the late 1990s or maybe early 2000s. I'm getting my dates mixed up. But, the whole point of Wren is that pretextual traffic stops are constitutional under the Fourth Amendment. And, of course, they have to have a observed traffic violation that justifies the stop, even if they have some other, subjective motivation that's really animating the stop. And so the Supreme Court has kind of blessed this thing where officers can have all sorts of nefarious reasons for pulling you over, including illegitimate ones, as long as the stated reason is a traffic violation. And what that really does is put a ton of the constitutional pressure on the question of, did you commit a violation or not? And, Deputy Babb testified in his deposition that he loves the Texas Traffic Code because he called it a beautiful document because it has all sorts of ways you could justify pulling somebody over. And it's sort of like that, 3 crimes a day thing or 3 felonies a day thing, where it's like, if I drive from here to my office and back, I'm sure you could ding me for X number of technical violations that I may or may not have committed. But the problem is, if you're not creating a record of what you saw, there's no way to falsify that. And so officers who are parking strategically to avoid capturing these violations, who are turning off their dash cams to avoid capturing, it just becomes a game of he said, she said. And all the constitutional violations flow from whether that first traffic stop was observed or not. Violation.
Or what point are you guys at in the litigation?
I believe a trial is set for next year. We have, cross motions for summary judgment flying around right now. We're wrapping up briefing on that. It wouldn't be surprising if issues that were disputed went to trial and we had fun next year, going to war on this. I think there's 2 basic goals of the case at this stage. The first is to say that if the Supreme Court is going to set up so many loopholes in our Fourth Amendment protections when we're on the side of the road, starting with the Carroll case and the automobile exception in the 1920s, all the way to that Wren case we were just talking about where pretextual stops are fine. If the court's going to bless all of that, then the restrictions that do remain have to be enforced with rigor, right? And that means that you can't pull people over for made-up traffic violations. You can't interrogate them in your car for acting innocently. and you can't, have a drug dog sniff a car and search a car based on a history of being totally unreliable for that dog. So those are some of the constraints that I think really need to be enforced if people are going to have meaningful Fourth Amendment rights on highways. But the other thing is that counties and cities have to be held liable when they set up these machines for violating people's rights systematically and exploiting these Fourth Amendment loopholes the Supreme Court has established, right? So it's important that, if a county is going to say the Supreme Court has given us an inch, don't let them take a mile. And I think what's important here is that they are doing that. They've set up an entire unit designed to exploit some of these loopholes to their fullest, and they're going far beyond, I think, any of the limits the Supreme Court has recognized. And in terms of Monell liability and holding cities and counties liable for the unconstitutional acts of their employees, I think the big value here in this case is to clarify some of how that works in the Fifth Circuit. Right now, the standard is really messy. It's quite confusing how you hold a city or county on the hook for unconstitutional acts of its officers, and this case is really designed to help clarify some of that. And I mean, if I could just give you a quick way to think about it. I mean, there's lots of things you have to prove as a plaintiff to establish Monell liability. But as I see it, one of the big points of this whole area of the law is that we're not supposed to hold municipalities liable for the acts of officials in like a respondeat superior fashion, right? We're not supposed to just, the negligence of one officer holds a whole city liable or a whole county liable. And here I think it's notable that the county twice had opportunities to thoroughly look into this. After Alec was stopped and his car was searched, he complained and said, my rights were violated. They looked into it, they watched the body cam footage, and they said in response to him in an email, quote, no policy violations were seen. So that's the first step, right? Even before we filed the case, they said, you know what? Everything he did followed our policies. Great. I'm going to sue you for Monell liability if you're going to say that. After the case was filed and some of these videos went up, right? They then launched a full investigation again into Deputy Babb. It went all the way up the chain of command, and they had another opportunity to say, you know what? He wasn't following our policies. And they said, actually, everything he did was totally consistent with our policies, except for lying about the dash cam. So they've had twice now an opportunity to disclaim his conduct is inconsistent with their way of operating, and they've said, no, we embrace it. And my view is, if the county wants to embrace what he did, the court should let it.
This is a good case for that because, he was doing, except for getting caught lying, he was doing what he was told to do, and they all knew that he was doing.
Yeah, the unit supervisor, had a practice, I think this is pretty notable, of actively watching back all the body cam footage of these interdiction officers. And everybody from the sheriff on down to the officers below him understood that he liked what he saw, right? So, if they're acting this way across hundreds of stops, according to their testimony, and the way that Alec's stop occurred was consistent with a long-standing practice on this unit, and everybody was watching these videos and they all said thumbs up, hard to imagine how that's not a custom.
Awesome, man. Well, I really appreciate you, talking to me about it, and I look forward to working on this video again. This one really is a classic. I think it's almost like not real. It's almost like Reno 911-ish.
Yeah.
When he's listing through all the drugs, and he thinks he's so intelligent, and he comes off as like just so dopey.
What's interesting to me was his deposition and the tone shift that you saw there. The way he comes off there is very conciliatory and very polite and very like by the book, and I was just following orders and all that kind of stuff. But there's a moment where my colleague Christy, who's the lead attorney on this case, was sort of asking him about interdiction, and he sort of said, pause, I'm so happy you asked that because I can't wait to tell you all about the things that I do. And he launches into this speech about interdiction and all the tools he uses and the way he psychoanalyzes people. And it's one of these moments where you realize, like, he has drunk the Kool-Aid. Like, he really does think that what he's doing is a science and a cool science.
Yeah, and he likes to talk. Like, the guy doesn't know when to shut his mouth.
No, and to that end, I'll do the same. I'll shut my mouth.
All right, man. Well, maybe I'll turn this thing off before my damn power goes off again. If something else happens, you guys get a ruling or something, let me know, and maybe we'll do it again.
I will. All right, see you, man.
All right, man. Appreciate it. Keep up the good work.
Thanks, you too.
So there you go. The training is unlawful. They're being taught how to be criminals. And I think what I get from this is if they use a dog to be able to enter your car, and the dog, they say, shows a sign that you have drugs in the car, why don't they use the dog to find the drugs in the car? Because that's the sign of bullshit. In other words, the dog should be able to go right in the car and show them exactly where it's at, right? Didn't happen, did it? Another thing is, you need to, if an officer pulls you out of the car, and this is an unlawful stop, and you need to let him know that this is a Fourth Amendment violation of the civil rights, and anything that happens from this point on will be tagged to the lawsuit and depositions. So, and you can tell him if you're going to search that car, and because your dog showed a signal that you made the dog do, you damn well better find something, because it's going to be added to the lawsuit. You need to inform these officers of this, because they actually are brainwashed, and they think that the tactics they're using on the citizens is okay. But I guarantee you, if these tactics were used on them or their families, they would be pissed off. They're not looking at it like that. They're looking at it like moving up the chain and making more money. They're not looking at what they're doing to you. And this video also shows you the criminal act of all the officers all the way up the chain. They're all working together, and they're using WhatsApp. You know, they're staying in the shadows. They know what they're doing is wrong. That's the bad thing about it. You know, I mean, AI is all through your towns, and they're using them, I'm sure, to run your license plates and let them know all about you, basically, because that's where we're at right now. But I said before, it's the training. And it's also the officers that's been there 25, 30 years that think they know everything. And they're teaching these cops bad things. And these cops think they're doing a good job. And they just showed you the training. Break the window and all this other crap. I mean, and spray them in the face with mace. They're abusing people. These are bullies. These are criminals. And let me tell you something. If they pull you over unlawfully, have your camera rolling. Because you already seen what they do to their cameras. They know how to operate them. They know how to turn them off. They unmute them, because they're building a case against you. They don't give a shit if you're innocent or guilty. They just want to build a case against you. These are not peace officers. These are not people that are actually working for the public. These are revenuers. These are terrible criminals doing unlawful things to people. So stand up for your rights, because they don't know the Constitution. They don't know shit about the Constitution. And that's the terrible thing about this whole thing. But stand up for your rights and don't take crap. Hey, subscribe, leave a like, give me a comment. Love you guys. See you.